Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville, with 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Welcome once again to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller, along with Mike Hightower here in studio, and Mike Tolbert is out at the farm, and we're delighted to have you with us. Of course, as always, Mike's on Mike is brought to you by the Jacksonville History Center, where Dr. Ellen Bliss and his fine staff help keep us going, and our fine donors who keep the cameras rolling and the lights on. Thank them very, very much.
Thank you.
Our guest today, once again, is Dr. Michael Bender, a professor at the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the University of North Florida. Dr. Bender is also the factory director of UNF's Public Opinion Research Lab. And as UNF polls have become really the gold standard here in the state of Florida. But Dr. Bender is more than just a pollster. He's a professor of all things political. And since we don't have a recent poll to talk about today, instead we're going to talk to Mike about the apparent reversal of political fortunes for our governor because of the current atmosphere and climate between his office and that of his Republican-controlled legislature. And with that, let's kick things off with Mr. Tolbert.
Dr. Bender, thanks for having the courage to come back and join us again. We appreciate it.
I mean, I thought I was a principal partner in this. My name is Mike, after all.
You know, in the first 6 years that DeSantis has been governor, he pretty much had his way with the Republican-controlled Florida legislature. But it looks like now that's changed, despite the fact that he still has a Republican-controlled legislature. And as we tape this today, it looks like the governor and the legislature are headed into this current session that's going to end as a train wreck without any conclusion, which means there'll probably be some extra sessions and I'm sure a lot of vetoes coming out of the governor's office. To list some of the issues, some of the problems, the governor and the House Speaker Daniel Perez are at each other's throats about the budget and other issues. Perez has accused DeSantis of spreading lies, throwing temper tantrums, and acting like an enemy. Now, remember, this is a Republican House Speaker. DeSantis has criticized Perez and called the GOP House donkeys for budget cuts to law enforcement. And as the legislative clock ticks, the House budget is $4.4 billion less than the Senate's, which means the Senate's budget is $4.4 billion higher than the House. And both bodies are differing considerably over tax cuts. My question is pretty simple, Dr. Bender. As a political scientist, how the hell did the governor and the Republican legislature get to this place?
Well, an easy one to start with.
Yeah, very easy. And in some ways, it's a really short answer. The answer is Iowa. And what happened in Iowa with Ron DeSantis trying to run for president in late 2023 and early 2024. And he went after Donald Trump and he lost. And in doing so, after Trump then went on to win the presidency, there has been some bad blood, and not just between Trump and DeSantis, but between their teams and between other elected officials that may be more closely aligned with one or the other. And we're seeing that play out not only in all the things that you talked about, but we're seeing it play out elsewhere as well throughout the state, even in local levels, and who gets appointed to what positions and who's not getting appointed to what positions. This all trends back to the failure of DeSantis to win the nomination for the Republican Party in the 2024 race.
Can I just jump in on one thing, though? Do you think that the results of the Wisconsin election in the state Supreme Court, which was not seen by anybody, but certainly seems to have a lot of ramifications, is that playing into this as well?
I mean, I think the short answer, I think, is probably not. And part of the reason is that, listen, you can look at the two congressional districts, special elections that we had here earlier in the month. The Democrats, shaved off half of 30-point losses, cut them to 15. They didn't win, but suddenly, if you extrapolate that out, a lot more districts become in play in 26. I think this is really a Trump DeSantis issue, and if you look at the people that are involved in this, I think you can draw some clear lines between those two camps.
In listening to you and Mr. Tolbert, during my almost 4 decades in Tallahassee as a lobbyist, I've seen disagreements between the governor and leaders in the legislature.
Think back to the Scott administration.
Yeah, and you know, and after all, you've got strong personalities and you've got egos, and somehow politicians and egos seem to go together, as well as lobbyists do. Let me just say, we're not without that.
Former broadcasters also can be thrown into that as well.
And political consultants like Holbert, it's off the chart. But nothing like.
Don't worry, professors aren't know-it-alls either.
All right, you won't work here then. But seriously, nothing like where the Republican speaker is making comments like willing, you know, he said of the governor, willing to choose to lie what he's telling the people in front of a camera. That's, I mean, we're getting to personal name calling. And then reverse of that, you got the governor criticizing the House Republicans for its publicly safety budget. Among other things, the governor now has said, they, being the House Republicans, didn't tell you that they were going to throw away their principles and just follow whatever the leadership told them to do. As y'all said, it doesn't sound like the legislature and the governor for the last 5 years. With national politics being in disarray, Dr. Bender, from your perspective at this time, is this really good politics either for the governor, who we know is lame duck, or for the speaker, for the House members, or for the Republican Party, from your perspective?
Well, I think it depends. and I say it depends on who you're looking at and what your goals are, right? So if you're Ron DeSantis, and from his perspective, if you are planning to kind of go quietly into the night, serve your 2 terms, maybe slide over to the private sector, become a lobbyist, something of that nature, this probably isn't the right path. But if you're trying to distinguish yourself and keep your name in the press, and maybe you have some sights on going back to Iowa in a couple of years, you know, keeping your name out there, like Donald Trump will tell you, any press is good press. So it's not the worst thing in the world for him. That being said, if they're honestly serious in DeSantis' world about having Casey run, sometimes you need to make some choices about who you fight, when you fight, and why you fight. And I'm not sure that this is necessarily the best choice for them. All that being said, thinking about, is this good for the Republican Party? Is this good for Florida? The budgets, yes, they're several $1 billion apart, but 4%, like they're going to make it. They're going to work it out eventually. It'll be ugly. Yeah. They're Republican budgets, right? Nobody's talking about increasing Medicaid. Nobody's talking about potentially reducing the amount of coordination with ICE at the state level. Nobody's talking about increasing to large degrees investment in K through 12 education. You know, these are Republican budgets. They're just, one's a little bit different than the other one. So from a Republican Party perspective, if you're somebody who cares about policies and is less involved in the personal politics, you know, both of these budgets, you know, kind of look the same, and you're probably going to be all right at the end of the day.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he also, as we remember, whatever the budget is if those who have disagreed with him, he has the power of the veto pen.
Right, and he did this last year, right? Anybody who he had an issue with, he vetoed all their tiny little pet projects in their districts. So, and this is kind of another piece to this. You know, yes, DeSantis has run roughshod over Tallahassee for 5 or 6 years, but he's made a lot of enemies in doing so. And he's alienated a lot of people, not only personally, but professionally. Yeah. And, you know, one thing you can say about Trump, he's exceptionally transactional, but he's more than willing to come back if you're willing to kiss the ring and say, yeah, sure, we can work together. Yeah. You know, look at our Secretary of State currently, right? Yeah, they famously had problems 8 years ago, but suddenly now he was the first appointment. You know, you don't see that with DeSantis. Yeah, if you're out, you're out.
Yeah, I have my own perspective, which I want to share at this point because I've thought about this discussion we're having today. You know, DeSantis is lame duck. Next year is his last year. From my perspective, I really believe come next year when we're running it will be Trump's Republican Party running the state of Florida. I mean, by the time the legislature is over, it's over. Looking into November of 2026, it's going to be it's going to be Trump running the local party, the state party. I really believe that. So
I don't know if I would agree with that, only because by 26 and 27, the reality of being a lame duck president has got to come in at some point. And I'm wondering if he's going to have the same political juice and same amount of influence over legislators and the fear of primaries and all of the other things that he has been threatening with. Is that going to be as strong in a year or two from now as it is today?
Well, I think it might be in the primary world. And that's important to consider. This isn't about November. It's about August.
Right.
It's August of 26 that matters. Because, listen, even if there's this big blue wave, let's say the economy goes into a tank nationally, Democrats are surging.
By the way, saying there's a blue wave is a kiss of death. You should never use that term. Anytime it's been used, the Dems have gotten clobbered.
And just to remember, I think there was a pollster here said, listen, Florida is a red state. I just thought I'd remember.
Right. And as I say nationally, right, if this is happening nationally, there are absolutely some House districts that could become competitive. Mm-hmm. And there are some state Senate and state House districts that could become competitive. But in January of 2027, there is going to be a supermajority or a strong majority at worst of Republicans in both the House and the state Senate in Tallahassee. And there's going to be a governor who's also going to be a Republican. So who that person is and who they're influenced by, it's probably going to be Trump, because in between now and a year and 4 months from now, I don't see somebody emerging to shape that. Mm-hmm. But the influence that they might have over, let's say, a Byron Donalds, perhaps, might be limited if the Republicans get shellacked nationally. You know, could you imagine a circumstance where Democrats have the House by 10 or 15 seats, something bad happens for Republicans and Democrats squeak out a 51-49 in the Senate, and now you're staring at a lame duck president and potentially a bunch of other Republicans now are saying, wow, maybe being connected to Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and Elon Musk might be forgotten a year and a half from now, but certainly Donald Trump, maybe that's not the record that I want to run on in this primary in Iowa.
This thing really all happened before the session began. I mean, this happened when there were special meetings going on about immigration and things like that. And it grew even more intense when a House committee began investigating the nonprofit Hope Florida for funneling that $10 million to two PACs the governor used to fight the marijuana and the abortion issues, which is another legal issue that I'd like to find out more about. But it just so happens that Hope Florida is a Casey DeSantis pet project. Now, the House probe apparently made it personal for the governor, who called the investigation a manufactured fraud. Explain in layman's terms what this Hope Florida tanglement is all about, William.
So the state was overcharged for some Medicaid by a healthcare provider, Centene. And part of the settlement, and Centene has $1 billion in settlements across the country. It's not just that they were overcharging Florida, the state of Florida. Part of that deal was, okay, we'll make a settlement. Centene will write a check for $67 million to Florida to reimburse the state, i.e. taxpayers. The DeSantis administration said, you know what? Let $57 million of that go to the coffers. We're going to take 10 and slide this over into Hope Florida. And Hope Florida is purported to be a nonprofit organization that helps Floridians get back on their feet economically, kind of out the systems of government. They can be self-sufficient, take them off the government dole. Which, if you're thinking about, healthcare and dollars, you can see how maybe some dollars there might be okay. We can talk about the legality of that and the morality of it and whether paperwork was filed, et cetera. But Hope Florida took this $10 million and then not a couple days later, poof, it was out the door to a couple of dark money political action committees associated with the Florida Chamber. And then a couple days after that, a very similar amount ends up in Keep Florida Clean. It was the organization run by Uthmeyer, who's currently the Attorney General. And then shortly after that, similar amounts of money made their way into the Florida GOP and even the Freedom Fund, which was DeSantis' personal PAC. And that money then got spent on anti-Amendment 3 or the marijuana laws that was up before the voters. So
your amendment.
Sir.
So that was right. So yes, this was a long-winded way of the how money can slide into and through political action committees and how it can impact and get spent on ballot measures, which are a little bit different than candidates. So if this was for a candidate race, it's explicitly illegal. It's not even close. But because it's ballot measures and it's issue-based, you can squint and there's a possibility that this might not be as illegal as it appears to be.
Is that like being partly pregnant? I mean, it's either legal or it's not legal, one or the other.
Well, one thing I think we can all say is whether something's legal or not is different depending upon the judicial body that's hearing it.
I can see the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony, but they're still crimes. Well, but no, I understand what you're saying.
And well, if it's a civil citation, that's different than going to jail, all these things. But it's not, this looks terribly politically. Like this is not something that anybody can look at and say, oh, yeah, I think it's great that taxpayer dollars that were overcharged to us and returned to the state in a settlement manner got funneled into a political campaign to campaign against a ballot measure that got 57% of the vote.
And the 2 ballot initiatives, which he came out and supported very openly.
Yeah, he opposed them exceptionally. I mean, he marshaled the entirety of the state government to stop these 2 ballot measures, and in ways that were unprecedented.
Absolutely.
And probably illegal. And still, he was successful, right? Like, let's be clear. He kept it under 60%.
But only by 3.
And, not that different. He talks about the landslide victory that he had in 22. It was 2 points more than both of these ballot measures got. So, perception, as you talked about, can be important here.
It's going to go back. If she decides, if in fact Casey decides to run for governor, it's the thing that you hear in politics. If you're explaining, you're losing.
Oh, sure. But I will always caution people, Rick Scott is not only a 2-time winning gubernatorial candidate in this state, but also for the Senate races as well. He's won a couple of times, and he's got a giant target on his back as a fraudster.
I want to go back to the political future of the governor. You don't have a poll right now, but I did read one recently that said in 2028, without Trump in the race, Vice President Vance is at 53%, Robert Kennedy is at 9%, and DeSantis is last at 8%. How does he get to Iowa with 8%? He's got to make a vast improvement to have anything to go do about 2028, I would think.
Well, I also think it's important to understand that we're so far out, and there are a number of candidates that would poll at 0% right now that might be meaningful and significant if they can get in front of the right people that can get them some resources. Between now and then, Vance's fortunes could change dramatically. It's also true that if DeSantis is going to do this, he's going to have essentially a year and a half of a head start on anybody just getting up there, because he's got nothing to do come the end of 26. So he'll just camp out in Iowa and he'll do his 99 counties shtick, and maybe he'll be better, and maybe he'll have learned from some of his mistakes the first time around. And maybe he doesn't think he made mistakes. Maybe he just thought Trump was too big of a figure to overcome. And without Trump, maybe he would be able to overcome it, because Trump probably isn't going to be in that primary race.
Recently, like in the last tax day, City Council President Randy White announced that he's going to run for tax collector in 2027. The three of us all know Randy. It's early. Now, it is early, 2027. But given his experience and his reputation for steady leadership, do you think Randy's going to have an opponent?
No bias in that question. Steady leadership. We know the guy now.
He is a friend.
Right. He
is a friend.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that getting out early and doing the work behind the scenes to keep other Republicans out is likely. Right. Not 0%, but very likely. Now, whether or not there's a Democrat on the ticket is a very different question. And I think this goes to a much deeper question in Florida politics about the state of the Democratic Party. If you're a Democrat and you look around for several years now, you can point to failures after failures after failures. One of the things that was done well recently, even though they got shellacked, was getting candidates on the ballot for all of the state House and state Senate races. Like, that's a W. You can't win if you're not in it. So are they able to do that and continue that process down to the local level? I'm not sure that the Democratic Party is there yet, but it would certainly be a bad sign for them if they can't get somebody to run for a constitutional office here. When you've got a currently relatively popular mayor running for re-election who could potentially have maybe a little bit of coattails.
Right.
So there could be an opportunity there if you can find some folks that can appeal and maybe have a little bit of name recognition.
Yeah. Speaking of the mayor, even though there are no polls that are giving anybody any indication just how well she's doing, I think we all think she is. But give us your idea of the last 22 months. How do you think she's done? What grade would you give her?
Well, I think it's important to grade on a curve in the sense that she's a Democrat and there's a Republican supermajority at City Council, and they've sparred over a number of things, whether it be appointments, whether it be attorneys that got appointed or not, whether it be Doge activities, all those sorts of things. But it's also important to keep in mind that they've spent $1 billion. They've handed Shad Khan $1 billion. They happily, everybody's on board with that. They've changed the pension system back for the police. Everybody's on board with that. The budgets were really much more collegial than what's going on in Tallahassee between a Republican legislature and a Republican executive.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you look around, there's a couple of people on City Council that maybe have eyes on 2027 themselves making some noise, but generally speaking, as far as things that are happening, potholes are getting filled is kind of the story I would see.
Okay.
Dr. Bender, I think you're absolutely correct. When Mayor Diggin was with us last week, she admitted her frustrations about having to deal with some of the politics with certain city council members. But she also said that the city council and the mayor, Donna, have gotten a lot of big things done together. And you just listed some of them. So I think that's important to keep in mind, and I appreciate you pointing that out.
And even some little things, right? I mean, it's not just big things. That budget, is a change in priorities from Lenny Curry's budgets. The money was targeted toward different things, and they thought about how much went to this and then how much went to that. But still, she got a lot of her priorities done, even in small ways throughout that budget.
One final question, though, I would like to ask you, if I may, because we really haven't discussed this. Do you see that there is a pathway for the Democrats to ever really get a hold once again of elections in this city?
I thought you were going to say the state.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is possibly, certainly.
I mean, we've always been a blue city.
Yeah, I mean, ish.
Well, no, a purple city.
A purpley type city, yeah.
I almost gave him a coronary.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think it's possible that, either party could make a little bit of a move. The one difficulty that either party might have going forward is the nationalization of politics. It's much easier to have a singular partisan monopoly, fiefdom, if you will, in a city if it's based on personal politics, if it's based on patronage, if you've kind of got, this is the machine in place locally. If you
Chicago
think back,
politics, Mike.
Right. If you think back to the early 20th century.
Our hometown.
Yeah. It worked pretty well when I was there.
Right,
Sure did.
Right. But with the nationalization of politics, there's fewer and fewer people willing to vote for Democrats at the local level and Republicans at the state level or the federal level. So you're seeing a lot more of alignment in those voting patterns. We don't right now have an overwhelming number of Democrats in Duval County. It's very, very tight and shrinking, has been. Now, does that change going forward? That's a very different question. What are the ramifications of the Trump realignment of the Republican Party? That hasn't shooken itself out all the way just yet. We're not there. We haven't exhaled. We don't know. So that could change things over the coming years for sure.
All right. Guys, we've run out of time, but it's been a great half hour.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Dr. Bender.
Thank you, Dr. Bender.
As always.
Thank you, fellas, for having me.
And we thank you, of course, for tuning in and joining us. We'll see you again next week. Catch us on your favorite podcast platform. And once again, our thanks to our friends at the Jacksonville History Center. We'll see you next week.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.